do.
All right.
But we just kind of we'll just glance through it and kind of go through it. And it's more of a introspective, if you will. And the reason why, and this isn't because of salt or anything, I just think people need to understand the thought process and kind of understand what's being done here and why, some people speak the way that they speak for a reason, and some do it out of, for emotional reasons, or it might just be gut reaction saying, hey, how dare you, dear sir, kind of situation.
Right.
But this is more of this is going to be more of a slow take, and I'll tell you exactly what's going on as we go through this.
Okay. Yeah, because I was kind of interested to I guess somewhat watch it because I understood he was a developer, so I kind of wanted to kind of get the developer perspective as into why he was disappointed about it. Yeah. So I haven't watched it yet. So
so we're gonna go through it. It's gonna be interesting. I should have had MVG on the cat. I mean, he can join if he wants. Like, if he can hit me up on Twitter if he wants to. He can hit me a DM. He'll have to unblock me first. But if he decides he wants to follow me or whatever, and then slide me a DM, he can go ahead and hop in here. I have no problem. I have no shame.
All right.
And me and him have been on the podcast. We've been on the Spawncast together before. Yeah, so this isn't this won't be my first interaction with him.
Right.
But so how do you feel? Like, I know you already put out a video or whatnot, but what is your general raw take about this announcement?
For me, one, is not surprising. Two, I can understand people's complaints in the sense of, let's say, performance. But like I said in my video, you have to solely break down, is it the system or is it the developer? And we've seen games perform well, 60 frames, whether it's 30 frames, 1080p, 720p. And yes, there are some games that are not, static. They're dynamic resolution. So sometimes they dip, but they don't stay there. But for me, the announcement was what Nintendo was going to do. They were going to revise it. The system at this point is heading into 5 years. We had the Lite, we had the version 2, but looks just like the original. So at some point, you kind of have to give some new eye candy and, to bring people that haven't come in. And you kind of have to keep, those that may want to switch it up from the OG happy as well. But as far as what they did and what they showcased was fine with me, because it didn't change anything from my perspective as far as the Switch. Because think about it this way: had that Switch Pro drop, now everybody's going to be forced to, in a way, to move because they want to play the games a bit in a better way, or either they're going to be exclusives there. So you're kind of forcing people's hands. And like we said before, Nintendo's trying to get to that 100 million and they're not there yet. But why would you alienate your consumer base before you even get there?
Exactly.
So
that's basically what it is. It's basically consumer based more 101 as far as that. You're talking about 80 plus million Switches out there. And I get it. Like, for some people, it's actually nefarious, where you got people out here that are like, hey, let's talk about Switch Pro as long as we can, because if we do, that takes away from the Switch running away as a success, because less people will want to buy one if they know something better is coming on, down the road.
All right.
So, which is weird because I got Legend of Josh. Thank you, some of you guys coming in. I see y'all coming through. A lot of regulars, Game Idea guys in the chat. Appreciate y'all. Since MVG likely wouldn't accept the invite since he blocked Shadow on Twitter. Yeah,
he wouldn't do it anyway.
He wouldn't do it. But I appreciate y'all coming through. Like Legend of Josh, he put it out there. He was the main one that put it out there. He said, hey, well, why would somebody do a Switch Pro? Basically a revision to just say, hey, it's still the Switch generation, but we're trying to match what the other consoles are doing in the same generation. Why would they do that when they could just go to the next generation?
Exactly.
So it's just, and it's never really, it hasn't worked. Like, the only one that worked, and I mentioned this in another Twitter thread, the only mid-generation hardware jump that helped was a non-visual one, and that was Connect and Move for the 360 and the PS3.
Yeah,
that literally saved their console because they were dying off
Yeah.
After 3 years of them both coming out, and they're like, well, Connect came out and Move came out, and that helped because the PS3 came out slow. It was Wii 60. I don't know if anybody remember that whole Wii 60 thing, and nobody wanted nothing to do with the PS3.
Right.
Then the whole Move thing came out, and the Connect thing came out, and it came all about, motion and Dance Central and all this other kind of stuff. And then, all of a sudden, out of the gate, after the Move thing, Sony is just like, well, we got a whole bunch of first-party heavy hitters. Bam, 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 bam. And then people started buying PS3s towards the end of the generation.
Right.
And PS3 ended up lapping 360 by the end of the generation. So they both were still a distant, cry from what the Wii was. Wii was the dominant, of that generation at that point. That still is a thing that press will not admit. But that was the only successful mid-gen refresh that saved consoles. Xbox One X and PS4 Pro sat on shelves. I witnessed it myself in multiple cities, in multiple states. Military bases, in Targets, Walmarts, whatever. You see plenty of boxes sitting on shelves, just sitting there. And they're steady pimping these boxes like, hey, well, you can get 4K this and 4K that. And you're like, but it's really 4K in just this game, or 4K 30 here, or 4K 24 frames per second here, or without this feature, or without that feature, or we can get you 120 frames per second in 1080p over here. Like, it was a whole mishmash of stuff that wasn't exactly, or checkerboard 1440p in the case of the PS4 Pro. Right. Like, it was never a true solution, and they knew it was a halfway step for the PS5 and the Series X the entire time. So why would that be a thing that Nintendo would want to chase? They saw how that went. But we'll go ahead and kind of delve into this, because this is a developer, ladies and gentlemen. So we will listen to him real quick. I don't know how the audio is for you guys, so y'all let me know how it is, and we'll just go from there. Before we start, Legend Josh says, riddle me this: if these fans, quote unquote, want Nintendo to be successful, why have them make a system that's proven to be effective? Yeah, exactly what we were saying just now. Like, why would you want them to fail? Like, that's like us asking Nintendo to make Wii U again. Like, yes, I love Wii U, but why even put that back out there again? So, like, we know what happened from there. Right. But this is kind of my response. I kind of showed this to Player Essence earlier today, but I have no takes on his response. So we'll go on this one here. Right.
Wanted to take a little bit of time to digest this information and really think about it in some more detail. And this is a topic that I wanted to talk to you guys about, because I think it's interesting, and hopefully this will give you a perspective of the OLED Switch model from the developer point of view. And for those people that don't know, I am a registered Nintendo developer, and I've already shipped 2 games on the Switch, which are Strife by Night Dive Studios and Shantae by Way Forwarded and Limited Run. And
so I'm pausing here for a reason. We all know what appeal to authority is, right? Not saying that he's doing this intentionally, but I saw this multiple times when talking to Nate, Direct Feed Games on Twitter. The first thing he wanted to do was just say, well, hey, I'm who I am. And also look at Digital Foundry, look at MVG, who's in this thing with me, and they're saying it's okay, so I can just say this too. No, like, you're right because you're right, and you have facts on your side. We don't need you to say, hey, look, I do this, and therefore that's that. If you're a developer, it means you write code for a closed platform. It doesn't mean you are the maker of the closed platform.
Exactly.
So you, and later on, we're going to see this, that developers are less in the know than mostly anybody when it comes to Nintendo, because if they don't give you a development kit to work on said new hardware, then how do you know the new hardware is coming? So, and that was kind of the big thing. That was the biggest thing, that when people start saying, oh, we got 4K and DLSS and all that. And I'm like, we got people, real quick, that'll take apart the Horizon OS and see everything that's on it. So we know exactly what's in the firmware. At any day and date, like, it's on the Twitter feed constantly. You don't even have to look yourself. Like somebody's already dropping. They're doing dumps every day.
Yep.
If there is no mention of what the new firmware is or no new tools in the SDK when they're dumping that every day, what makes you think that that's available, for somebody to develop on? There's not even an SDK out there for you to start using DLSS on whatever this new Switch hardware is going to be.
Right.
Then how are games being made for it?
Especially if you're a Nintendo developer, you of all people should have already received something.
Yes,
that we deemed that was going to come this year already.
It means and then and on top of that too, that means once you receive it, you also sign an NDA, which means that even if you can't speak on it.
Exactly. Yep. And
that's just when people talk about, hey, I got my sources mixed up and all this, I'm like, I've been following this industry for just as long as everybody else.
Right.
I've been a gamer for just as long as everybody else. I know information technology and how intellectual property rights work within that space as well. I know how a project is managed. I know how IPs are managed. And I know how more than anything, how patents are managed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to release a patent for a product that's going to be released, say this year, January about this time, we would have seen a patent for whatever their new project is.
Yeah, we would have seen it by now.
We would have seen it if it was going to be released in the United States this year. It would have been something, at least something out there in the shape or form that we understand.
Right.
Since this new OLED Switch is still the same Switch, you don't really have to update the patent.
No.
So that's kind of when I saw that. Hey, okay, none of that stuff got updated. There's there's new registered trademarks going forward or anything like that for any new names and whatnot. That's what tipped the scales for me at that point. And that's when I was like, hey, these guys and all the press can say, oh, we think it's coming. We think it's coming. They can do it all they want. Yeah. But we all know what they're going to do. They're just going to change their mind at the last minute and say, well, we thought it was what other people were saying. No, it was you. You were saying it the whole fucking time.
Exactly.
I digress. We'll go ahead and continue. But, I'm gonna go ahead and try to play the rest of it, see if we can make it through. But I just want that to be known for everybody going forward here, that a lot of people start their arguments by saying, well, I am this. I mean, what does that mean? I can list all of my accolades and all my experience all day long. Mm-hmm. But if I'm still lying to you,
right.
Not saying he is, but here we go.
Right.
And I am working on more Switch games, and there are more Switch games to come. And I'm actively working on Switch dev hardware. So really, I just wanted to get those credentials out of the way before I start talking about things, so you guys have a better understanding about my credentials and who I am. Now, with that said, I want to talk about the underlying issues that I have with the announcement of the OLED model. And I will first say that the announcement wasn't a big surprise. Many were speculating that there would be a new SoC-based chipset announcement that would come this year with 4K DLSS. And based on the developer angle that I just mentioned, I wasn't really so sure about that. It just didn't feel right to me. And if you've gone back and listened to my thoughts about the Switch Pro, I've always felt like something just fell off about the whole thing. Because a new SoC at the end of the day means that code must be binary compatible with that new SoC, or it must be backward compatible. And with no SDK or information that third parties were given access to prepare themselves, I didn't really feel like that this report was accurate. And while I do think new hardware is coming, and I want to stress that, I just don't know the timing of that. It could be next year, it could be 2023. I just don't know. And I think anyone that you ask in the industry, or at least pretty much 99.9% other than Nintendo themselves and maybe some exclusive third parties, don't know the answer to that either. So going back.
So, did he not just say what I had already prefaced?
Yeah, but what he's saying, is common knowledge. Like you said before, we all know they're working on a new system. So my main gripe, and it's not necessarily with him, it's just with content creators in general, they make it seem like, well, we know this, we know this, we know this. And like you stated, and like he stated, there is no new SDK. There's nothing that's going to these developers. Of course, there's new hardware coming because Nintendo's not going to stop. Nintendo is a toy/game manufacturer. That's all they have to stand on. They're not Sony. They're not Microsoft. So of course they're coming. But where I feel a little irritated is when it does come, it's going to be, I told you so. And it's like, no shit.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, the first thing he showed was him, quote unquote, doubting it in 2020.
Right.
But for the last couple of months, I've been hearing on multiple podcasts, Nate the Hate going on for multiple podcasts saying, hey, we're expecting this, we're expecting this, and we're expecting this. And MVG is on this podcast.
Yep.
And he's not checking them. And I'm like, okay, so if you're feeling this and you're saying this and you said this on one tweet this year, that was the only tweet from May. That was the only tweet this year that he decided, oh, I'm not really so sure. Right before E3, you put a tweet out. Like, you would know of all people, if you're actively developing and doing projects on Switch, that is not a go. Like, nobody that you know that's developing right now has an SDK. Or if they do have an SDK, it's behind closed doors and they can't talk to you.
Right.
So why would you allow or validate, either by omission or acceptance, somebody that's talking to you every week, literally on a podcast, that's saying this asinine stuff?
I think it all comes down to that middle ground, to where you get the opportunity to provide information as a content creator, but then you also lack the responsibility and, acceptance of, hey, I'm performing some form of journalism. So they stay in that middle ground. So that way it's like, well, I gave you this, so pay attention to me. But hey, I'm not really a journalist, so you can't kind of fault me for that. I just kind of put that out there.
See, and that's where the fallacy goes, because okay, you can always use what they try to say is, and what they call this, I forget the actual term for it, but those familiar with the matter is a typical trope within journalism. Basically, it's somebody in confidence saying, hey, this is coming kind of situation. I can't really give you details, but this is coming type situation. And then you as a journalist say, oh, I could put this on the back burner and say, let me save an article for this because this is coming type situation. Right. That doesn't mean write it right then at that point in time and say, hey, look, I have vested interest from my contracts, my contacts that say this thing is about to happen kind of situation, because you don't have anything to validate it other than people familiar with the matter. And that can change with the wind every single day. Like, people familiar with the matter will say, hey, sharp exo screens, which didn't happen. Mini LED, which didn't happen. Both of these were reported falsely by the same guy, by the way, that they're quoting. They just use Bloomberg as a name. They don't use the same Mochizuki guy. They don't use his name because they know his track record isn't that good. So they just say Bloomberg. I'm like, don't you mean Wall Street Journal too? Yeah, because he had a lot of his batting average was really bad at Wall Street Journal too. And when I say stuff like that and I just say, let's just go ahead and drill down and go through all of this. Hey, you got this guy that you're using as a source. He has mentioned everything under the sun, going all the way from the Switch being 1440p capable in 2016 to there's going to be a new 4K or 4K capable Switch in 2019, 2020, and this year, to include directly in front of E3 that there's going to be some type of announcement situation. Like, dude, your track record is not good, and that's basically what you're saying. What he's saying at this time or whatever. And then, I mean, MVG wasn't really in it. He just kind of came in because he's like, hey, this is my buddy that you're screwing with on Twitter. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get you coming in here, bro. But assumptions was the whole reason why this got started to begin with. Right. And I'm just calling people out on their shit. I said, I will name names. I said it in another tweet already. So I'm tired of y'all over here playing like, oh my God, you know what? Oh, well, you know what? It's just something different. And things happen all the time and it's okay. No, because y'all got a whole bunch of people's hopes up for no fucking reason. Just to pad your stats, just to get your YouTube channel up. And it's fucking stupid. There's no reason for that. I get it. Yes, you want to get money. You want to get a whole bunch of people to sub and whatnot. That's fine. Spin that wheel. Be Super Metal Dave 2.0 if you want to. But you gotta hold the L that comes with that. So as soon as you make that crazy assumption, and you're just like, it's coming, and you're like, yeah, it'll be here. E3 comes and goes, and you're a ghost for 2 weeks. Real talk.
Yeah.
This is what we doing. You just like, oh, well, yeah, I don't got really nothing to say about it on the video. I don't really got a tweet to, well, today I held L. No, none of that ever happens. There's no accountability. No. I was one of the main ones to say, hey, you know what? I think that Project NX is going to be a heterogeneous family of systems. And I was like, it's going to be an architecture. It's not going to be just a system itself.
Right.
Turns out after the fact, I ended up being kind of right. But initially, no, I was wrong. It was one system that was able to be hybrid and do kind of two things in once, instead of starting off as a handheld and then becoming a console and then having this same OS going everywhere kind of situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I held my L and I was like, you know what? NX didn't turn out to be what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Even with Dave seeing the information in his face, he's like, let's go on to the next thing. Oh, and there will be a 4K switch because, hey, it's going to get this new SD card. Like, what the fuck? Like, what kind of, what are we talking about here?
I mean, he kept riding that horse because, like, even OJ bowed out. He was like, I was wrong. And he moved on. He kept going. But Dave is going to ride this horse until it dies. Like, he
won't let it go.
He's not. But, I mean, I understand, the whole source aspect of it. I understand that some things change. We get all of that. But my thing is don't report on it unless it's concrete. Don't entertain it unless it's concrete. And even if things do change, for me, if I have a source and I have a reputation as a content creator, and that's going to bring any type of news to you, if my source was wrong, I'm going to go see my source. And I'm not using that source again. So the fact that it keeps getting spread out there, I understand that everybody wants this, let's all hold hands and hug on each other community. But at the end of the day, like you said, hold some responsibility. Be accountable for what it is that you're doing, because you're fueling the fire of this stupid console war. Like that's what you're doing. That's the reason why people are at Nintendo's necks, because you hold things to this standard as in what is coming. And then when it falls short, they don't blame you because they love you. They just gonna go after Nintendo because in essence, they can't really touch Nintendo, so they can just blame them all they want to.
And so now you've got people on both sides of the ball here. You got people that are, trying to glorify this for their own. They're trying to make an edifice of themselves or whatever, so they can say, "Hey, look, I called it," kind of situation, and it didn't happen. And then you've got other people on the other side that know it's not going to happen and are chomping at the bit for when Nintendo doesn't meet those expectations to just say, "See, we told you Nintendo isn't doing this, blah, 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 blah." Now follow all our negative articles because we never wanted Nintendo Switch to take off to begin with.
Yeah. Yep.
So now you have both of those needs being satiated, and you got the people that used it for clout or whatever. Now they're just, plausible deniability at this point, because that thing that ShadowCasts said, the reason why ShadowCasts said it couldn't be possible, that's the excuse I'm going to use right now to say what? Well, Nintendo's always working on new hardware, and we never said that whatever the new model is that comes out is going to be the Switch Pro. I mean, you've only been saying it for the past 3 months. So how now all of a sudden, they just, but there was no way for us to see this one coming in, this one in between kind of situation. How not? We also knew about, so this model that just came out right now, we already knew it was coming because it was in the firmware.
Yep, sure was.
Codename Aula. It was already in the firmware. It was the third model that nobody knew what it was going to be. ABCD was the code name for it in after the Tegra name. So it was there, and we knew it was going to be Tegra based. So, but people wanted to ignore that because all they wanted to focus on was the whole 4K element. So they're like, well, what's going to be the Switch Pro? Because if I just talk about, hey, the next Switch model, which is what I kept saying, HAC 001-02, and it ended up being a whole different model number. That's neither here nor there. But basically, that's what it is. HAC 001-02. It's the second take on the same architecture. But they took that and tried to force another model in because they knew that HAC 001-02 doesn't sound compelling or a reason for people to get excited to click on a thumbnail.
Right.
And it's just frustrating. And I hate, like, right here in motion, we're seeing the plausible deniability right now. There is no way for us to really know. But you're a developer, bro. Like, I don't. Okay.
Hey.
Back to the OLED model. Now, I do love the hardware, but as a developer, unfortunately, it's a disappointment in many ways. At a minimum, I would have expected to see some improvements in areas that I would consider low-hanging fruit that wouldn't require a sweeping QA pass across the entire catalog of games to make sure that they didn't break. And I'm talking about increased memory and or increased memory bandwidth. Now, right now, the Switch has 4 gigabytes of RAM on board, and only approximately 3.2 gigabytes of that is available to developers. Now, the remaining memory is used for the operating system and background tasks. Now, in 2017, 4 gigabytes of RAM was fine, but in 2021, it's really not going to cut it. Now, the push to increase RAM when the Switch came out was obvious, but let's kind of talk about that a little more in some detail. So, if you guys remember back in 2017 at GDC, Nintendo and Capcom were on stage together and they started talking about the Switch. Now, Capcom has played a vital role with the Switch hardware, and you may recall, or you may not, but I'll leave a link in the description below, that Capcom and other third parties pushed Nintendo to increase Switch RAM to 4 gigabytes. Now, they did this because Capcom felt confident that they wanted the Resident Evil RE engine to run inside of that space. And Nintendo were able to get the RAM up to 4 gigabytes. Now, imagine if those discussions didn't occur. We may have been left with a 2 gigabyte Switch model or maybe something else. It's really hard to say. But there was a push to get that initial 4 gigabytes of memory on board the Switch hardware, which was the right move at the time. Now, for the most part, 4 gigabytes is perfectly acceptable. But I will say, when you're making exclusive Switch games, or if you're starting out the game's development cycle on the Switch hardware, or you're planning for the Switch, 4 gigabytes is totally fine. And for the most part, many of these games that you'll see on Nintendo Directs and whatnot usually are exclusive Switch games, and they play and look really well on the Switch. What I'm really concerned about are the ports to the Switch, and I want to talk about that in some more detail. So
I'm going to stop right there.
I got a lot to say about that, but yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, because
Okay.
that's exactly where I'm heading.
So I've heard this RAM conversation before. And like I said, I'm no tech head, so I understand with more RAM, of course, you can do a lot more. Understandable within my PC. You know, I run 32 gigs in my PC now, so my music software runs phenomenal. Now, he stated something in regards to games that are tailor-made for the Switch, run fine, but the ports are the issue. We've had this conversation before to where a lot of companies should kind of take that mindset as into either A, make something separate, or B, make Switch the leading platform.
Thank you.
because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, if I see that this one over here sells more, has more attention, and is on the lower end of graphic specs, RAM, whatever, let's start there, and then we can move our way up. But the thing is, where I have an issue with some developers is we have this huge vision, and we got to have all this power. But we've seen this and we've heard this from generation to generation to generation. And majority of these games don't change. Exactly. They just get bigger and sloppier. They're Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, Madden. The two like they look better, but they still perform horribly. And that was something that I forgot to mention within my video. We are so concerned about frame rates and RAM and resolution to where AI is still dumb as a rock. Like there's certain things we still overlook, and we want to continue to have the prettiest thing. And I was like, okay, our video games are like bimbos. They pretty, but they dumb. It's just, come on. Like we got to do better than that. But yeah, I didn't like that part.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, first things first, if your problem is, oh, well, we having issues with these ports, make Switch lead platform. It is clearly the best selling of the 9th generation platforms.
Right.
make it the lead platform. There's zero reason for you to avoid doing that at this point, other than bias or lack of confidence in your skills in developing for Nintendo Switch Primal at this point. Like, and there are no excuses because NetherRealm is done with Mortal Kombat 11. Start building Mortal Kombat 12, starting with Switch first. Like what are we doing? What are we doing at this point? So it's just one of those things where we can make excuses for every Sony platform, regardless of what the negating stances are for that situation. PS3 had issues because it had segmented memory. PS2 was clearly the worst performing console of that generation. Like it didn't even do multi-texture and all the other kind of stuff in hardware. It did it in software. So, but people didn't seem to have issues working around those limitations during those generations with far less capable tools than they do now. Now all modern engines are scalable. So Unreal Engine 5 will run on a potato if you put Unreal Engine 5 on a potato. So I don't understand what the holdup is at this point. And they're like, oh well, RAM. No, just make Switch your target project. What's the holdup?
Because we're past that time frame of these games were already in development, so they weren't thinking about the Switch at the time. That time frame is done.
It's
so
gone.
You have no excuse at this point.
And you see it's working. You see it prints money.
Yes.
So why would you avoid? Because now what you can do is now you can make cheaper projects because now you're in a situation where you could develop within 4 gigs of RAM, within 32 gigs of storage as well. So you can make a 32 gig cart, which means that, hey, your project is going to be 32 to 64 gigs on other platforms. So you don't have to worry about huge downloads and waits or having to pay Sony for extra storage when you store your game on the store, that type of shit. None of that is even an issue anymore when you're developing your game. So, and I guess the other issue is why is 4 gigs now a problem for a system that at the most part can get away with running some games at 480p? Because you're talking about playing on the go or what have you, and you only got 3 gigs of RAM to play around with and whatnot. Those 3 gigs of RAM don't matter when you're running 720p and below.
Exactly.
Now, if you're 1080p and you're upscaling from there or whatever, yeah, I can see where that could be some issues. But when you think about it per frame, you don't need more than 10 megabytes of RAM to draw a 1080p frame buffer. And if you have that many varied texture assets to where your 1024 by 1024 textures are that huge, then you're not handling your budget well for textures to be where you surpass 4 gigs like that. Now I understand that there's probably a whole bunch of extra programs and stuff that they want to take up a chunk of to use for CPU tasks and stuff like that too. But then that stuff that's too CPU heavy for a Switch anyway, because you only have 3 CPU cores available out of the 8.
Right.
So what are you gonna do? Like, you have to come up with something, because this system is designed to switch from 3 cores that are live while you're playing the game and 3 cores that sit on standby when the game is asleep. So one or two things needs to happen. You got to figure out how you're going to run 3 cores at all times, or you're going to have to figure out a way to either crunch that game down, redo some subroutines that run on 1 core, crunch them down to be able to it's going to have to not be dedicated to 1 core, and it's going to have to run in tandem as a multitask thread on another core with another task. Like, you're just going to have to figure that out. Like, the Switch has a separate DSP. Why are you running audio threads? That type of shit. Like, there's no reason for a CPU to be managing your fucking sound when you have a dedicated DSP on the fucking system. That kind of stuff. And that was the same problem on the Wii U. So, and Wii U had an ARM chip that handled all that shit. And people were just like, no, let's just run it on the IBM chip. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And we had, growing up, we had ports of games that were completely different games because they ran to take advantage of the hardware that they were on.
Exactly.
Like, it wouldn't be possible to take a Super Nintendo game and just dump it on the Genesis. Like, it's not, it don't work that way. Rewrite the game for the Genesis. Like,
I think that's kind of where I see this going too, because like I said, I may not know a lot, but I know the basics. And I think they're trying to strong arm Nintendo into x86 so that they can just copy and paste.
And it's not going to happen because Nintendo's going to continue to do their own thing, and they're just going to have to deal with it.
Right.
And you can't sit here and tell me in a world where all these concessions are magically made when you need to port a game to a cell phone, but then you're looking at Nintendo like, oh, that's too weak.
Especially the whole Call of Duty thing. That kind of threw me off. I was like, how did that get to mobile before it got to Switch?
Whole ass Madden.
I mean, I already understood the whole EA thing. They gonna do what they do. Because you're bold enough to drop a game and then turn around and say, hey, look, it's the same game. We just got roster updates. That's when you a bold somebody. You ain't trying to drop a game over there. I already see what EA trying to do.
What's sad about this is later on in this video, he's just gonna prove us right because he's gonna name drop Witcher 3. And if you read or watched the Witcher 3 post-mortem, they talked about all the junk code they had to cut out from all the CPU tasks that they were handling to basically useless shit. Right. And they took all that. They're like, hey, this stuff is idling a lot here. We got all these 32-bit threads just here, there, and the other, blah, blah, blah. They just cleaned it all up to work on one core, and they gained efficiency like that.
Yeah, because that wasn't it. Was it Warframe that they fixed on the Switch, and it actually made the other games better on the other console?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I was like, wow.
So it's not like it's not something that people can't do. And I mean, we hear the whole well, we don't want to invest into doing something like that. So wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're developers and you don't want to program?
That's what it sounds like to me.
I think you get paid to program.
All right.
Not push yes on a game engine. Like you have to learn how it can't just be you designing a level, pressing compile, and then that being it. No. Obviously, it's not that simple to game design. I'm not gonna talk about it like that. Obviously, there's millions of lines of code that you need to add, even if you have a game engine already working for your target hardware. There's still a whole bunch of code you got to add. But I'm saying in the scheme of that, wouldn't you want your code to work as pristine as possible? Why would you just want to say the hardware needs to be there just so you can say plug and play, it's here? Like PlayStation and Xbox are pretty similar, and you see a lot of issues regarding compatibility from one or the other when one is not the lead platform. You see all kind of issues like memory leaks and stuff like that because they just pressed go. And that's not, don't you want to see some type of dedication in the game that you're getting? Like, why even, if I wanted Me Too games, then I would just have a PC.
Right.
Exactly. Just port it to PC and go from there. And then let the community, basically, because for the most part, the PC, they're editing drivers all day on PC.
Oh, yeah. They always fix games.
To make sure these games run correctly, like way faster than the development teams could.
Right.
So, that's what I would ask for if I just want a Me Too system and I want you to give me, hey, here's this thing we programmed for something else. Good luck. Like, no, that's not what we're here for.
That's the feel though. Like they just don't want to put in the work because it's a Nintendo thing, and we've seen it. We've seen it whether there was the excuse of still being with cartridges, not having actual DVDs, not having actual Blu-rays or having expandable memory, and then now, okay, well, you're not x86 at this point. There's always a reason, and that's why I tell people, regardless of had they did a graphical bump, it still wouldn't have mattered because there's always something.
Yep. Well, it's not natively doing that, so therefore we're gonna and it's crazy coming from him because this guy, his last project was developing the emulator to get Shantae to run on the Switch. Like, what it takes to make this kind of stuff work, and you're still gonna regurgitate what the status quo wants. Like, more than anybody what it takes
exactly
to make. So why would you suggest that the answer is for Nintendo to bend to developers and not the other way around?
Exactly. And Jack Gates actually makes a good point because this is something else I mentioned, to where if it's Nintendo, it's Nintendo's fault. But if it runs bad on the other consoles, then it's the developer's fault. 2K's wrestling game, but the wrestling games in general have been running like crap for generations. And no one's like, oh, the Xbox just can't run it. It's 2K and them losing Ukes and THQ and all that other stuff getting separated I'm like, but how does that work here, but it doesn't work over here that way?
Exactly.
I'm
so
confused.
like that's kind of my scenario for PC ports. Anytime a PC port looks bad, the first thing you do is blame the developer. Funny how that works. But shouldn't that be the case all the time? Because that's, you know, the first, well, PC can blah, 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 blah. Well, no, because it's even worse for PC because you can't predict all the 50 million different configurations that are going to be
different variables. Yeah.
So actually blaming the hardware is probably a good excuse there.
Right. Yep. Because you can have a capable PC and then one little thing go wrong. It's a wrap. Yep.
So it's just funny how it works that way. You get what I'm saying? So, but we'll I guess we'll entertain this. Like, geez, man, like.
Over the years, we've seen some really impressive ports come to the Switch. Some of them that are labeled impossible ports, such as Doom Eternal, or Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or The Outer Worlds, to name a few. So let's talk about that a little bit. So The Outer Worlds released in 2019 in October and appeared on the Switch in June of 2020. And remember, when that game came out, it was quite rough. It took many more months of polish for that game to work right, to look good, and to run at the level that Virtuos and Nintendo was probably expecting. Now, you may remember last year, Doom Eternal released for PC and consoles in March of 2020, and finally arrived on the Switch in December of that year. So a long, long time had passed, and we didn't hear much that had occurred during that time. Ori of the Will of the Wisps released in March of 2020 and released on the Switch in September of 2020. Now, if you take a look at the developer retrospectives of these games, they usually talk about memory limitations and how they can effectively make cuts to fit their game into that confined memory space.
As games have become more and more optimized for this previous gen, PS1, PS4, Xbox One, and now, of course, this next gen, there's a move in a new direction, a kind of a paradigm shift towards random access memory use versus pipelined memory. So, traditionally, you want all the data that the GPU is going to need to be loaded on the GPU before it tries to do anything, so that there's no memory stalls. Mm-hmm. And that's necessary because of how slow memory bandwidth used to be and how little GPU cache there was to work with. It was critical that that data be there in time.
And this is usually at the expense of things like textures. Texture sizes get reduced, also utilizing things like sprite atlases to, reduce on-memory overheads as well. And in 2019, there's an article from Cuphead developers discussing how they optimized for the Nintendo Switch and the cuts and considerations that they needed to make. But if we're talking about impossible ports, we have to talk about The Witcher 3. Saber Interactive and CD Projekt Red did a masterful job on that port for the Switch. But if you take a look at the retrospective of that game, Saber and CD Projekt Red discussed that the original builds were using about 5 gigabytes of RAM, and during that 15-month of development was spent optimizing and squeezing down the memory overhead to make it all work. And look, the end result was impressive, but there was a lot of time and work that was put into this port. Now, all of these impossible ports are great handheld experiences for the Switch, but they all come at a cost. And back in 2017, up until now, I think many publishers were okay footing the bill for that. And in some cases, Nintendo themselves threw money into the ring, especially when we talk about The Witcher 3. But it's now 2021. We've got next-gen hardware. Unreal Engine 5 is being adapted in up-and-coming games. We've got techniques like ray tracing, HDR, DLSS, more complex systems, better cloth physics, shaders doing so much more. The Switch OLED model simply is going to get left behind. Now, we've already seen some studios decide to use cloud-based gaming on the Switch, and this is for the reasons exactly that I mentioned. Studios are going to become less and less interested in investing in the potential months or years of time to get their games running on the Switch. Now, the cloud is something that I think publishers are going to start leaning on more on the Nintendo Switch. Publishers want their games on the Switch because it makes them money, but many of them don't want to spend the millions investing in getting these ports up and running as impossible ports. The cloud is a cost-friendly equivalent for them, which at the end of the day offers the same or almost same gameplay experience. And with the Switch OLED model offering a wide Ethernet connection in the new Switch dock, I get the feeling that we're going to continue to see more cloud games to fill that void. Now, I also wanted to address
Now, the first misconception is we're going to tie Ethernet to latency, and that's another thing where I get where that's coming from, because that's just an assumption that most people don't know how to manage their own internal network traffic. So if you're using wireless, then technically speaking, that's going to be way worse than wired per se. But if you're managing your own stuff and you know how to manage packets, that's not really gonna matter. So you could play it undocked and still stream the game and not have an issue. But I guess my problem here is, why are you caping for a publisher? The publisher's job is to pay for the product to be produced and to market the product that's produced so it can sell.
Right.
Why would you cape for them? You're a developer. You aren't a publisher. Why are we? You get what I'm saying? Look at where the Overton window is. Why would the Overton window be starting at absolving the publisher from doing their job? If they got to pay more money, they have to pay more money.
That's like Kevin Durant trying to take less money so the owner can pay to get more people on the team. No, he has billions. Make him pay that money. Like, you get yours, and then whoever comes along get theirs too.
Imagine these excuses being used for not putting games on Xbox. And I'm going to say that they're valid because, especially right now, your chances of having a product that's going to be profitable is actually of a higher chance on Switch than it is on Xbox. So why are you producing on Xbox?
Yeah, that is a great question.
Don't produce that SKU.
Now, let me ask you this, though. What would be the downside if they just added RAM opposed to anything else? They just, let's say they upgraded it to, I don't know, 8 gigs. 8 gigs, maybe 12 gigs of RAM.
Then you still have the other problem that he mentioned, which was the memory bandwidth. Right. Because it's still just going to be the LPDDR4, which, you know, I mean, for all intents and purposes, for what it's doing, it's perfectly fine. You're talking 720p or below, or up to 1080p with regards to you being able to have the type of bandwidth for the type of reaction that you're, I mean, not the reaction, but the type of frame buffer that you're trying to build each frame. Mm-hmm. So why would you need specifically higher than that unless you're trying to do, you know, something grander? Are you trying to render 4K frames natively on a Switch 720p screen? Are you really trying to do that? Right. There's really no need. And Nintendo had this SoC designed specifically for their reason. NVIDIA is like, yeah, this is what we got. This is perfectly fine. Also, we've already built this. It's the Shield, and it works just fine for this resolution. Mm-hmm. So we don't like. So you're going to say NVIDIA doesn't know what they're doing,
right?
You know, and or how within, you know, the Switch launched in 2017. Mm-hmm. It was purchased as a bid in 2015, and at that point in time, it was clearly the most powerful mobile hardware on the market then at the time when they bought it in 2015. Obviously, time exists. Moore's law exists, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you blame that on them with regard to that? Like, the same thing applies to the PS4, and it still sounds like a rocket engine. So what are you going to...
Yep, because that was the biggest complaint. Oh, that Jaguar CPU is an issue. That's a big issue. It's outdated.
I don't get it. And then so you want more RAM, you want higher bandwidth, and then what? You're going to create higher fidelity visuals, or you're going to add these other effects on here that, by the way, because we're talking about a system that's going to be played mobilely a lot too, because we got, I think it's like a 50% split or something like that from the last survey that Nintendo put out.
Right.
A lot of people are not going to notice all this shit that you're talking about. We're not going to notice ray trace reflections and all this. You're not going to be able to, especially if you got an OLED screen, it looks good no matter what anyway. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about with regard to, hey, we need more post-processing effects? And by the way, the post-processing effects that he's mentioning are old things that were done before HDR back in 2007 and such. They're just more commonplace now because now the hardware can actually do it instead of talking about it back in 2007 and then that hardware couldn't do it.
Right.
Now it's more abundant and more common. So I guess that's what he wants to talk about here. But it's just frustrating to hear that kind of stuff because I'm like, these things will not get you what you're talking about.
Right.
What will get you what you're talking about is a steady state, always on 200-watt GPU. And that is not what a Nintendo Switch is.
And that's the thing. And like Andre had said in the comments, like, you don't want the Switch then, because you say that the appeal is the hybrid nature of it. Then there's things that come along with it. And yes, you could possibly, gut out the dock. But like I expressed in my video, like, no one's going to be willing to pay $200 to $300 some dollars for a dock. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to be reality. So at the end of the day, you either wait for Nintendo to make a old fashioned under your TV console, or you just deal with what's happening right now. But obviously, it shouldn't be too big of a deal because I look at it from this perspective. I look at Nintendo's first parties, I look at Sony first party, and I look at Microsoft's. You see who's selling the most. You see who's fans showing up. Exactly. When I look at PlayStation, the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, yes, this is a great game, has a great story. You went got fantastic actors, but what you just put out doesn't even equate to what Nintendo just made from 30 plus million they sold. If you spent 50 million to make this and they only spent 5, they made a bigger profit than you.
So why is the Overton window making Nintendo match people that are technically right now behind them in profitability, console sales, and everything else, especially profitability on software?
I think it comes down to popularity at this point. And even when you talk about, game sales, outside of third parties, Sony and Microsoft are not selling like that. So I don't personally myself, I don't get it, because if I see this console is doing what it's doing, the games are selling. Yes, we have that weird narrative that people don't want to put their games on Nintendo consoles because all Nintendo fans buy are Nintendo games, but that's been disproven on so many accounts. It's ridiculous. But when it comes down to the nature of what we talk about and what we discuss and what we play, the graphics tend to get them more sales than the gameplay. A lot of these games are just pretty. They don't have any substance to them. So you'll get your one-offs for sure. But at the end of the day, the conversations, the hype and all that other stuff is what make the sales happen. And that's why you see these games go on sale in a matter of like 3 or 4 months. They don't hold up.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think that's the thing more than anything else is that, that your product is valuable because it perceives and holds value at this point. Like, we're talking about the DLC for a niche RPG is $230 right now on Amazon. Torn of the Golden Country, or more at this point. So obviously the demand is there. People are willing to buy this stuff, especially when it's out of print. So it's like, I don't see anybody chomping at the bit looking for the last copy of Horizon Zero Dawn like that.
At all. They're giving it away.
It's just not literally giving it away. Literally. Right.
I just got
it for free. Wait and it'll be free.
Oh, it is free. You got
yeah.
It is free.
Because I think it was free when they did the whole COVID thing too. Like it was free for the COVID thing, and then I think it's just free to all PSN members now. Or something.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just crazy the way this turned. So why do you think? I don't want to sound sinister here, but when I see a gaming chair, a certain type of microphone, certain type of lighting, certain type of format, Nintendo doesn't pay for any of that. I know a lot of other platform holders and PC third-party developers that will just say, you know what, here's a gaming chair.
Yeah.
You stream a lot here. And that's not saying that that's who we're looking at now. I'm saying the majority of influencers, Gaming Press too, because Gaming Press does videos now from their house now.
Mhm.
And they magically all have this same little outfit. And it appears that if you talk from their perspective, the Overton window is now from them. You continue to get these free things. Hey guys, look under your chair. There's an Xbox. Oh, gee. I wonder why all my reviews for Xbox now are 9s and above. It's,
hey, get your money. I mean, it's just, I'm never going
and
to
now
change
you have a
anybody's
job
pockets,
working at Xbox after that.
which is nuts.
Yeah, just absolutely nuts.
But I mean,
So-
I get it. It's all copy and paste at this point.
Yeah.
Everybody, like you said, same chair, same microphone, same LED lights. It is literally copy and paste. The same thumbnail looking shot whenever you see something. It is very old and tired. But it's one of those things of you see the originators and then you'll see those that just follow suit. And some get lucky. I'm not even gonna lie, some get lucky, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the name Sony rings bells. And then I feel like the name Xbox rings bells because it's always associated with bickering back and forth with Sony. And like you said, Nintendo never gets mentioned unless it's something negative, because they don't mention the Wii. They have no issue mentioning the Wii U, but they don't say anything in regards to sales with the Switch. Oh, PlayStation 5 is selling astronomical numbers. Yes, because scalpers are buying them at a high alarming rate and people still want them.
Exactly.
But
and they had nothing to say before the PS5 came out because Switch had already caught up with PS4.
Yeah.
Like it was literally like, hey, so the rate that PS4 was selling at that was astronomical during 2013. Oh yeah, Switch did that in a couple of months. And there was no talk of it. There was no, and if you saw an article for it, it was from some small site or whatever, and nobody ever picked it up.
Right. Yep.
So it's just like, why start from a position where Nintendo hasn't negotiated? I don't understand, especially given how profitable they are. They're at this point, they're being close to a $10 billion company, and we're talking cash. We're not talking about other assets. 10 billion cash at this point, which means no debt, unlike the other two companies. Why are we starting from a situation? And also, they were there long before Sony and Microsoft. Why are we talking about Nintendo playing Sony and Microsoft's game when Nintendo is the OG?
The only reasoning I have for that, and like I said, I could be wrong, but this is just my thought process. I think it's just a lack of confidence within a product. Because if I swear up and down I have the best game out there, let's say I have the best platform out there. When you go to Sony and Microsoft, you're not competing with nobody. But if you go over to Nintendo, you got Donkey Kong and Mario to worry about. Even if you don't go into the genres that they're in, which is not many. Let's say you got a shooter on hand, a first-person shooter, because Nintendo doesn't have an exclusive first-person shooter. But most people play on Xbox and Sony because, that's kind of where the Dude Bros and everything kind of spawned at, and even PC. But let's say I think we mentioned this before, and I've mentioned this on a previous podcast when I was running my podcast with the Gaming Grounds podcast. Call of Duty has the window wide open on Nintendo.
Yes, it does.
There's no competition over there. None. But the thing is, it's like, do you really feel like your product is that good? Or do you know that people have been riding with you this long? So regardless of what you release, they're going to purchase it. So you're just going with a surefire thing.
They're going with a surefire thing. And there's also the other agreed upon fear too. If Call of Duty actually goes to the Switch and becomes a phenomenal success, i.e. kind of like how Fortnite was.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Switch or Nintendo platforms going forward are the Call of Duty platform, and they may force to be lead platform for Call of Duty.
Especially with Gyro.
How does that look for two other console platforms that need Call of Duty way more than Nintendo does?
They need it.
That's like I said. I said I said this day one. I said when Switch came out and I saw that, hey, you know, they're getting all these games that never showed up before, because Bethesda hasn't given a crap about Nintendo since Worlds Walled on the NES. They haven't. That's the last game they published for Nintendo.
Wow.
And then here we go with Skyrim. So I'm like, so if there's Madden and there's Grand Theft Auto, that's game over. That's it.
Oh yeah, that's a wrap. That
Sony and Microsoft would be terrified if that was a thing.
Yeah, because like I said, even with 2K, like if 2K really, like for me, I think 2K is truly trying with NBA 2K because it is getting better, but I feel like that engine in itself is crap. Like it runs bad on consoles now. But if we say, let's say Madden 2K runs well, they actually do something with FIFA, and like you said, just Call of Duty. Even Battlefield, like I don't think Battlefield would be able to run because that's just ridiculous. But with Call of Duty, it would, like you said, it would take everything away from Sony and Microsoft because at the top of the charts is third parties for them.
Yep,
it's not their first party titles. And a lot of people like to say, "Oh well, if such and such was over there, they would outsell Nintendo." Even if you're looking at the 1-to-1 right now, no, they don't, and they sell on multiple consoles and still don't meet them. I don't know.
So this is a little bit more nefarious, but, and this is a question for the chat too. Why isn't, because we're talking about journalism at this point, why isn't the gaming press asking that question? Hey, you know, the Switch is selling like game booksters now, and you guys have done Red Dead Redemption 2 now, and you're talking about doing Grand Theft Auto 5 for Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. There's another system in there. What are you guys doing for the Nintendo Switch? And you can't say, oh, we're hardware limitations when you originally made this game for the PS3. So there's no excuses. So what is your answer? Used to be DMA Design. I mentioned that on Twitter and people got lost. DMA Design is what Rockstar North is now.
Right.
And I say DMA Design because that's how far back Rockstar North's beef with Nintendo goes.
Right.
And so that's, and the reason why I asked that question is it an agreed upon agenda if that's never asked? Because they ask all other kind of uncomfortable questions to Nintendo. Hey, do you guys got a Switch Pro? What's going on with this? Other people talking about those rumors. Hey, we're talking about rumors about Grand Theft Auto 5 right now coming to Switch.
Yeah, because
so Gaming Press, get on that and go ask Rockstar why isn't it coming?
Right. Yeah, because I remember Trey was talking about that because apparently there was supposed to be a thing with that happening.
I remember at one point in time when Wii U was first got announced, it was in 2011, and the press asked Reggie if Grand Theft Auto was coming. He was like, "You're gonna have to ask Rockstar about that. Talk to Rockstar and see what they say." And so basically, what he's saying is, we're cool with Grand Theft Auto being on Wii U. Clearly, somebody isn't. It's not us.
Yep. That's the sad part because you made Chinatown Wars for the 3DS. So there will be no, like, reimagine that game and bring it over to the Switch.
So at that point, nobody ever asked Rockstar. It never happened. There was never a follow-up question to ask. And yeah, Cornelius asked in the chat, he said they put LA Noire on there. Yeah, they did. And there was Rockstar Table Tennis on the Wii as well. But we know what this is all about. Where is Grand Theft Auto?
Yep. That's the table scraps.
There's a reason. And I mean, basically any major game like that, because Red Dead Redemption as well. I mean, where is that at? At this point, I'm like, go all the way back, go old school, and where's Red Dead Revolver? Go find that whole franchise, you know, because the original team was actually what ended up being Platinum that did the original Red Dead Revolver when Capcom was doing what they were doing or whatever. And then, you know, Rockstar took the franchise. I mean, there's nothing to say you can't go back and revisit that and then try to make it better with the same old flair.
Yep.
But for historical purposes or whatever. But I don't even know if I want to go through the rest of this because at this point right now is really kind of depressing. But you get where we're going with this, right?
Yeah,
So
I get that. I get the gist of what he's talking about. This
is a developer, and then we go through and we start to see the same old talk, the same old Overton window. And I'll put it in a chat, or I'll try to ask it on the Spawncast, and it kind of like it gets talked over. Even if you pay to ask a question, well, I don't really think it's like that. All right, on to the next thing. And I'm like, all right, okay, cool. And really at that point, but I'm like, if it's not that serious to you, then you don't want it to be serious to you, because the real answer to the solution is not what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and a lot of people, talking about Grand Theft Auto 5 was on 360. Yeah,
it could be done. It really can be done. It's just one of those things of, do they want to do it? And at this point, I can see if Rockstar had moved on, we're still on GTA 5. So obviously, you're still investing in it.
So even if you want to give us excuses, GTA 5 can't run on the Switch, I'll accept that bullshit answer. What about Grand Theft Auto 3 and 4, San Andreas, Vice City?
Oh yeah, that I think people would literally go and break their necks to buy San Andreas cleaned up on the Switch. Yeah.
What about those?
Oh.
And then just watch the crickets, because that's really what it's about. It's old business, old grudges, whatnot. And the sad part is that the person they had a grudge with at Nintendo isn't even there anymore.
Right.
That man ain't even alive no more. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So, like, it's just one of those things where that's clearly what it is, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. They just say, yeah, well, it's just not there. And on to the next item on the news kind of situation. Like, bro, come on, man. And yeah, it's a game idea guy said GTA 3 and Vice City are already on mobile. So yeah, like, you already have binaries for this stuff. You've already done the conversion.
That's my biggest issue. Like, they make that hurdle for mobile. And I understand it, because of course mobile is a big platform. Everybody has a phone, and depending on if you game, then that's, a little different. But when you look at something like the Switch, that is a shoe-in. Like, imagine just Grand Theft Auto being there. I mean, you see it work for a lot of these other developers. They say, well, let's see if they really will buy our stuff. And they'll go to the old catalogs and they'll drop it. Yeah. And they'll do it. And as long as they did their due diligence to actually do what they need to do for the game, then people will go and buy it. And it's been, like I said, it's been shown to where some games sell into the millions. It's just, I feel like it's just that fear of, if we go over there, then our numbers are not really going to turn out. But at that time, they can still blame, Nintendo, buyers don't show up. But it's like, in reality, your game's not all that great.
Yeah. Boston Salmon said Doom sold 10 million on Switch. I don't know. I have to go check
that up. That's a lot. You have to look. Yeah. I know it showed out, but I didn't know it showed out like that.
Yeah. I mean, I got 2 copies myself, but like, nah, I don't. I mean, if it did, great. I mean, that's fine. Yeah. But I mean, that's a telltale sign at that point. Like, make an effort. Like, whatever kind of new projects, like whatever the new DLC is for Doom Eternal, like, at the forefront should be Switch at that point. But yeah, it's just weird, because, and I don't want to sound like the conspiracy theory guy, but we live in a world where we know for a fact, through multiple quotes from Microsoft, that they literally took away Rare. They bought Rare because they wanted to cripple Nintendo.
Yep.
Like, we had Bill Gates quoting saying Nintendo will be dead within a year in 2000.
Right.
So we can't just really say that, hey, these are bits and pieces of, some type of conspiracy type situation. Like, no, these words have been said before. Yeah. So we've heard the audio of the guy that recorded with his cell phone of EA talking about the Wii U and everybody laughing. Like, we've seen this. So if there's some type of industry-wide type grudge or whatever, like, there's evidence to point towards that. There's certain incidents that say, hey, look, y'all kind of the whipping boy.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is what it is. And it's weird because you're the whipping boy, and we still gotta work with you. Because Jesus, we gotta work with you.
We can't ignore you.
Can't ignore you. Let's put Call of Duty in 480p over here so we can pay for the last couple of games we made and then make money on.
But but here's my question though, because we've been talking about the developer side of things, right? As far as the consumer, my question to the chat and even for you, for those that don't buy Nintendo platforms but then beg for it to go third party, do you really think they would support those games if they came third party?
No.
I was wondering because I was like, you won't buy the system for the games, but you claim you'll buy the games when they come to your platform of choice. That doesn't even make sense to me. So you just missed out on like 2 or 3 generations because you feel that strong about it.
And there's really no excuse now at this point when you could buy the competition for $200 at the cheapest point and then play said games. Like and you can't say, oh, when Nintendo games are expensive, there's a sale on eShop every week. Like just like how PSN had mad sales, Nintendo's got sales it hurts so bad to see all those because I like physical games. But so there's no excuses. I don't really understand why there's so many different excuses to not bite the bullet and play these games, man. Like whatever, man. I play games wherever they come. So it's just strange to me that so many, you talk about all these concessions that have to be made for what is clearly the market leader.
Right.
It's the market leader. Like make the Switch lead platform, and these aren't even an issue because you're designing for 3 gigs of RAM from scratch. Right. And guess what? It's just a bonus if you port it to the other platforms.
Right. Yep.
So
we know that's not going to happen. So
do I even like? I don't even know if I want to even scrub through the rest of this foolishness because I don't even know. Like, there's nothing really else to
with the Switch. Unfortunately,
he just talks about the development kits and whatnot and how they went from. They're going from 6 gigs to 8 gigs.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, and it doesn't really mean anything. Really, that just means that developers have more leg room to play around with while they're developing. They still got to crunch down to 4 by the time they're done. Really 3 by the time they're done. So it's just easier for them to work with going from there. And he's talking about the clocks, and at this point, it's not going to be. You could try to overclock the Switch as much as you want. It's not going to get you what you're trying to do.
All right.
And I hate it because so in this point right here, when he was talking about the clocks, he started talking about Age of Calamity. And what I hate about this is you're a developer. Let me see if I can find it.
Would really smooth.
How are you
happen with the
an American developer?
Yeah, we're going to see Breath of the Wild 2 and Pokemon Arceus.
Let me see what he's talking about here.
I hope he's not about to say what I think he's about to say.
Ports from the likes of Panic Button. Will we continue to see those? I am not really so sure until we see something new coming out from Switch hardware. Now, Panic Button are the masters of extracting the very best from the hardware, but there's also a tipping point that will occur where the current hardware continues to be around, but the budgets don't make financial sense anymore because there's just going to be so much time invested in trying to get these games running at a good level of performance where the profit and loss margins, the overheads involved just don't make sense. And I think that's really what Nintendo needs to be concerned about. So in conclusion, yes, I am a little disappointed at the Switch OLED model from a developer perspective that it didn't offer anything new to developers to really sink their teeth into. And I think a lot of us would have really have liked to have seen that. But at the end of the day, I'm as much in the dark about what's next for Nintendo as what you guys are. But let me know what you thought about my thoughts and opinions in the comments below.
He's as much as in the dark as we are, but he's corroborating what Nate the Hate had predicted as far as a new Switch. The new Switch we all know is coming anyway because it's going to be the successor to,
or whatever it's called. Yeah.
I think I missed where he was talking about Age of Calamity. I think it was before the Zelda here because he started talking about frame rates and whatnot. But
PlayStation 3.
Basically, what he talked about in here was he was talking about how the frame rate was bad and everything. And I was trying to see where
much of this has to do with the limitations around memory bandwidth. And that is the pipeline in how fast memory is read to or written to. And on the Switch, unfortunately, it's woefully slow. And
so I saw this in multiple videos. It's not just him. It appears to be, and I'm not gonna say it's a coordinated effort, but everybody keeps making this comment, so I want to correct it. He's talking about memory bandwidth being slow here and not having enough RAM and whatnot to be able to have these massive scenes and whatnot. The issue here is that this is an old engine. Mm-hmm. All of these games are designed. We talked about this before. These Hyrule Warriors games, these are Dynasty Warriors games, right? The Dynasty Warrior engine, the developer himself said, hey, look, these things are kind of more CPU bound. And when it was originally on Wii U before this with Hyrule Warriors, he was talking about how he learned because Orochi Warriors 3 Hyper was on Wii U and it ran like crap because he didn't understand the CPU. Then Nintendo's like, well, we'll put money into it, develop Hyrule Warriors, and magically some of those problems were resolved. Right. Because, hey, you know what? Now we kind of know what the interrupts are. It's not heavy SIMD, it's heavy integer, which is another thing too. Like, so we classify these CPUs all the time, talking about, hey, floating point units and all this other stuff and what you can kind of do. I want y'all to know that a lot of these specs that these developers cling to, that they try to use, they are choices. So you can have a CPU that's really, really good at high integer performance. And if you write your engine around high integer, you can get maximum performance out of that, similar to what you would with if it was high SIMD. The only issue is it's easier because high SIMD is technically in parallel. Because you're using dot product instead of, hey, A plus B equals this, or A times this is equals this. You can do a series at one time instead of a lot of math in one go. But it doesn't matter as long as you get the result. So if you know how to do old math in an old integer format versus a matrix format, who cares? Right. That is really a choice. So when you start talking about programming and you're actually writing an actual program at that point, does it really matter if your CPU is not doing the thing that you expect, if there's another way for you to handle the problem? Right. And I think that's the issue. I don't think anybody's asking like, hey, like, you know what? Hey, you're saying the performance isn't kind of getting there on the CPU that you're working with, but this CPU isn't designed to do the thing that you're talking about. Did you try to do, hey, you know what? A bunch of integer operations and see what your performance gains would be there, and then go from there? You say, oh yeah, we tried, but it wasn't as close to this, or it wasn't as easier to write as this. I don't think that's ever happened. And I don't think any of those conversations have ever gotten that deep before. And I think that's part of the problem. Right. And me asking a question like this right now would get somebody like him offended, or anybody else offended. Like, don't get offended, bro. I'm asking the question because I want the answer. I want you to explain to me. Like, if the way you wrote it is a bit of an issue and either you don't know right now and you need to get back to me, just say so. Right. Like, that's just one of the things. And it's sad because the type of things that I'm asking right now is anything that anybody could be able to ask with time and a book. Yeah. It's not ignorance and me trying to come up with a way to defend Nintendo. This is how technology works. Right. The same reason why I said, hey, why are y'all talking about new hardware and there's no new format in the SDK? Mm-hmm. Like, there's just Tegra in the SDK. Why are y'all talking about new hardware? And unless it's a new Tegra that we don't know about that's supercharged, yeah, what are y'all developing on? Because it's not this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just common sense stuff, right? So that's just kind of where I'm going with that. And I'll go ahead and close this out because this dude is, I'm done with that. But I mean,
it's pretty interesting. I mean, when you look at what you're discussing right now as far as information and what's available to the consumer, it all comes down to the consumer for one. If you really want to dig deep into the ins and outs, or even just the basics of what it is with game development. And this is something I've always thought about too. Like, I've seen artists and producers like do these, I guess you could say, one episodes or episodic series of like, this is what we went through to make this. But it seems like when it comes down to the gaming aspect, they're trying to keep the consumer as ignorant as possible, so that
Exactly.
way you can say, hey, all we gotta do is give you this, and Xbox gives us more, so we can do this, and Sony gives us this, so we can do this. We just ran into this issue with Ratchet and Clank. Hey, we can only do this with the SSD. SSD is nothing new.
No.
We've had that already, but it was the driving force for the PS5 because there was nothing else there. And then at the same time, it's going to continue to get pushed because they're also hiding the fact that they don't have a way to actually allow you to expand your memory, because that area they have closed off that they showed you seems to be a cooling issue, hence why you haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah.
So now we have this bigger problem of, like you said, these buzzwords. They're like the defense force to hide what really is going on, because what we saw in Ratchet & Clank, that could have been done. Even they told us, oh, the reason why there's no flying in the original Horizon is because of the hardware limitations. So we have SSD now. So now you can now do this in Forbidden West. Oh, come to find out, it's cross-gen.
Yep.
So what happened to the SSD issue that we had from the last one then? To where only this game can run on PS5.
In with regards to those tech issues, all I did was hear about tongue baths when people were reviewing these games or whatnot, or previewing these games. It's like, oh well, look at this, and we're watching the trailer again of Ratchet and Clank again, and we're watching it, and just look at the ray tracing on this floor. Like, they will highlight it that way. Look at the ray tracing on this floor. Oh, so you're saying that it's not on every surface? So you're saying that the entire game isn't ray traced? Mm-hmm. Why aren't you asking the developer why the entire game isn't ray traced?
Put them on blast, because we're not at that stage, and that's what frustrates me so much with this whole concept. We continue to push tech into these systems for no reason. Yeah. If you yourself have not mastered 1080 60, why are you at 4K? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So why do we continue to push a narrative, and then when you look at it, on one end you have the console manufacturer saying, well, the developer said they need more power. And then on the flip side, the developers are saying, like, well, this is going here now, so we got to be prepared. It's like, but no one's really making any advancements outside of Rockstar. Exactly. So I'm like, cool, come on now.
And even in those games, you'll see some invisible walls.
Yeah.
So it's just odd. And I'm like, so if you're gonna, if this is what your end goal is, and you want to have this product this way, and you're confident in it, why does it sound like all the time the press is doing nothing but your job for you? It just sounds more and more to me like, when I hear a interview or they're asking questions or whatever, it's a tongue bath, man. It's not them asking questions that they actually want to ask or get answered. It's not them actually reviewing the product. It sounds like they're going down a list of check boxes written by the publisher for that game. Like, specifically, like very specific buzzwords. They make a point to point out a very specific type of ray tracing. They make it a point to talk about, hey, due to the speed of the SSD kind of shit. I'm like, dude, real talk. Like, Mark Cerny already let the cat out of the bag. It's not really the SSD. It's the fact that they have so much more RAM now, and they stage the data in chunks of where the SSD is, and the SSD is able to load faster than a hard drive would. So the same tricks that they did with a regular hard drive back in the day work way better, because you have more RAM available to you, and your disk speed is way faster.
Right.
So, but really, if you just bought more RAM, it really wouldn't be an issue at all. Because if it just had 32 gigs of RAM, the entire damn game could just run around. Right. Just stage it all and go from there. But it's just one of those things where it's just frustrating seeing it, and I feel like I'm the only person that sees it when it's happening, because I'm like, whoa, that was gross. I don't know. And they really focus on just that word. Like, they want that to be a buzzword. Why are they doing that?
But it kind of feels like when I was doing a podcast on Anchor, like, you can approve or you can pick certain sponsorships you want to run, and there's key points you have to hit for you to get paid by that sponsor. So I have a feeling this is the same thing. Like when we were watching these the tech content creators that don't really even dabble in gaming, they just dabble in tech in general. They got the first looks and the first hands-on because they have the most viewers and followers, but at the same time, we think that they have the, you know, the know-how. They know the ins and outs because they review every piece of tech that comes out. So you have your Linus,
whether they know about it or not.
Right. So you have your Linus Tech Tips, you have your Marquise Brownlees, you have all of them. I respect all of them. So there's no, you know, bash at them. But Microsoft and Sony know what they're doing. They know who to go get. They know who people follow. And it's like, hey, by the way, use these words to let people know this is what it is. Because in anything, for anybody that's ever purchased a console day one, when that honeymoon phase wears off, you start seeing the real. Like I'm seeing it now with my PS5. Like, yeah, the new dash and the new UI and the controller, that's all fantastic. But now what?
Yep. So what other industry is this bullshit able to fly? Like in the how can I say this? In the motor enthusiast industry, like if you like cars and stuff, like nobody could really lie to you. Like either you have the horsepower or you don't.
Yeah, you can't get away with that. Nah.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like maybe sports. I don't know, and it depends on what the sport is.
Smartphones,
definitely.
Yeah, they pull it heavy all the time with smartphones.
Definitely,
because literally, I just had a conversation with a dude on Twitter because he was like, "Well, he took an issue with the OLED device, and he was like, well, you don't see Apple doing this. Apple releases their product and they tell people to buy their product. They don't ever tell you, oh, go buy the older product. I was like, yes, they do. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, when they showcase that new product to you, they then in turn go and show you, hey, here's the price point. But by the way,
here's
these
all
older
the
products
stuff
are cheaper now.
So there's no excuse for you not to jump in.
Exactly, because these OS go across the board because we support all the way down to whatever iPhone was, you know, iPhone 8 or whatever. So it's not like you're missing out. You may be missing out on this new camera, but you're not missing out on any features. So like I told them, it's the same thing here. Like Nintendo's telling you, here's the OLED version. Software is still the same across the board. You don't have to upgrade, but you can if you want to. Your iPhone, your iPhone 12 Max is no different from my iPhone 12 other than the camera. We still function in the same way on the software. It may have some bumps and specs here and there, but even when you look at TVs, I don't see anybody complaining about a 50-inch being less expensive than the 55. But they do the same thing. The same way the screen got bigger with the OLED screen from an LCD, they charge you extra $50. Now
in the TV industry, they do try to lie a little bit. They try to hide stuff here and there. They try to say, "Oh well, our contrast ratio is blah 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 this and blah 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 that." And I'm like, okay, so but how bright is the image? You can tell me what your darkness is, but how bright is your image? Because if the contrast is 1,000,000 to 1, because you start at brightness that's already close to black, yeah, of course your contrast is still going to be superior because you're going from gray to black. Like it's just it's. So it still happens somewhere there. But this is probably the worst, where people don't know any of the terms. They don't really know any of this stuff. So it's probably kind of bad. Probably one of the worst ones because a lot of people that are not technical buy smartphones, but they still know what they're purchasing and why. They know they're paying for either more storage or or whatever is going to be in the camera or the screen or what have you. Whereas these consoles, they don't know. I talked at length in another podcast, and I'll probably do another video again, talking about how like Sony and Microsoft up until the very last minute went out of their way to avoid people finding out that these were tablet CPUs that are in them yet again. And people were like, "Oh, Zen 2 is an architecture, bro. Tablet is in Zen 2 as well, and it's basically any CPU that has less than 8 megs of L3 cache. So if you're at 8 or below, guess where you're at? You're at the bottom of the barrel. Your desktop CPU has 32. So you're gonna say you got a workstation class or a server class CPU just because Microsoft says it's kind of secure. Nah, bro. It was workstation class because it had all the extra cache in it.
Yeah.
And it supported things like, I don't know, it supported ECC memory for one thing, which none of these consoles do. I mean, these consoles don't even have regular memory now. They just have GDDR6. So it's like there's no real, and they know what they're doing because they won't tell you, they won't give you any clues. They won't give you a stepping or a model to what the CPU is. They're just say, hey, it's a custom APU from us. But you got clocks and speeds, and I'm pretty sure AMD is going to release something similar to it at some point because you guys are going to have failures.
Right.
And they got to resell that. They got to make some money off of that some type of way. And they made a clone of the PlayStation 5 CPU and just sat it out there. It's really the entire CPU and GPU, the APU, but the GPU is disabled. So you can buy a disabled GPU and a full PlayStation CPU out there from AMD right now.
Wow.
It's a completely different model. It's the 4600S, I think. But it's a completely different model, or what have you, and it's out there. And they didn't want to tell you this before the console came out. That's part of their deal, and that's kind of how it's been since really, I want to say Xbox at this point.
Right.
When the Xbox first came out, because nobody wanted to know what type of Celeron was in there or whatever. At the time, they were trying to say it's kind of a Pentium 3, and I'm like, you're missing a lot of registers for it to be a Pentium 3. Like, I don't know. It's kind of, but it was one of those things where you find out after the fact, yeah, it was actually this. And then you know from there. But why are we doing that kind of thing to deceive, give customers the information? Because they're probably going to ask, like, give them the information. Hey, this is what's in here. This is what you're paying for. This is what's in the package. And then the sad part is now they're not telling you because there are things that'll make you look bad, and then you brag about the one thing that makes you look good, which makes you disingenuous all the way. So you're going to tell me exactly what your GPU clock speed is, right? But you won't tell me what your how much cache you have in the system because you don't want to tell me what class of CPU you have over here. Right. And in the prior generation, they told you what the CPU and the GPU clock speeds were. And then once you found out that, hey, the Xbox had a higher CPU clock, the PS4, they took down the CPU clock for the PS4 on the PS4 page. And Microsoft took down the GPU clock on their page and just had the CPU clock up. Like, what are we doing? Like,
they playing the game. They playing it smart. Because, I mean, honestly, think about it. If we had all three consoles and they provided you the bare minimum, they told you how much memory you had so you can have your storage, and they told you what you were getting with the console. They didn't tell you what resolution. They didn't tell you what frame rates. You just had to figure it out if you played the game. It'd be a lot of people just kind of sitting back and waiting because they need numbers. And I tell anybody, if I came to you right now and I said, yo, Shadow, I run shirts, I make my own shirts, and I just made a 50% profit. You don't know what profit I made originally. I could have just made $1 the other day. 50% profit. If I just made $2, I didn't, but 50% sounds better. Like, that's just the reality of it. And no one's going to fact check you.
They take the numbers and juggle them however they need to, man. Right. Yeah, it's cool, man. It is what it is. All right. Yeah, and I got y'all check out Game Idea guy over there. He talking about social gaming syndrome and whatnot. Sure. He got a video on that, so y'all need to check that out.
And then Mondo Mario, like, I thought about watching his, like, that dude just creeps me out. I don't watch his videos no more. Like, I used to watch Review Tech, but then, like I said, the whole cucumbers and the unicorns.
Yeah, he kind of bugging.
Dude, come on now. I stopped. I mean, I saw he put a post up there, but even with his videos, I know he's going to report on everything. So I'm kind of curious as into what he said, because he said, he can understand some of his points, but statements are a bit unrealistic. But I'm curious. I mean, I'm here to listen to everybody's opinion and input, but
I used to watch him a lot. I think after the whole fallout, once I had to cover him defending Dreamcast guy being
I saw that
wrong.
Because you posted that the other day, didn't you?
Yeah,
like, reposted it. Yeah.
And I just couldn't go back to taking him serious anymore. And then I started watching his other videos, and I'm like, yeah, you got the cucumber thing going, and you still doing the whole "I'm the sweaty, look at me" guy kind of situation. And now all the things that I used to talk about all the time, now he's magically talking about them now because he's a dad now. So now he's like, oh, I need time for this and that because I'm a dad and I'm a family man and I got to do all this and that. I'm like, bro, like there were gamers like this for a long time. And we've all been saying the same stuff. And we've been saying for the longest time, like, hey, everybody ain't sitting in their damn basement staring at a screen all day. Right. Nobody got time for this all day like that. We game for a certain, like there was a reason why the people that did gravitate to Wii U understood Wii U. That one commercial, it was one commercial, and it barely aired that much, but it was the one that showed, and it just showed the cube, and it showed the couple sitting in the cube.
Oh yeah,
and the girl wanted to watch her show, and he wanted to play Mario, so he did his number right here and played it just like this. And then the girl cuddled up next to him. He was playing Mario, and she was watching the show. Like that's immediate right there. You know, you get it. Like you get it as an adult. You get it. Yeah. And it's like, for whatever reason, I don't know what was going on with Nintendo's marketing at the time. It was horrible, but they didn't pimp that one enough. They should have. There was a bunch of other ones that they did. They could have pimped enough, but I got that one quickly. Apparently, a lot of other people didn't see it and understand that quickly. But now Switch here and everybody gets it because that's what we was trying to do the whole time.
Exactly.
Say, like, hey, look, it doesn't have to be on the TV all the time.
Right.
So that was just a whole nother thing, man.
I don't know where this is going to go because I've already told you I'm doom and gloom on the gaming community as a whole as is. But when it comes down to what is our next step as far as gaming, these consoles are going to be around for a long time. Because for me, I feel like they shouldn't have come out. They should have got delayed, but had one said it, the other one probably would have followed suit. Yep. But honestly, they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and even then they're failing at that because they're not PCs. You know, you're not open-ended like that. So you're kind of, stationary. You got your stuff set, it's locked, and you can't really change unless you make a revision. So I don't know where we go, because even if we take the systems out the equation, I don't think the games are matching up.
They aren't. And I guess that's, the biggest problem is that, they're buying this hardware because they expect to be able to play a game that quote unquote blows them away and what have you. But you're not getting that. Even when you do quote unquote get that, you're not getting that in a game. You're getting that in a setting or a set piece or a certain moment. Like, oh, that thing blew up over there. Wasn't that cool? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but that happened one time. What are you doing for the rest of this fucking 40-hour game that you're playing that you pay $70 for?
Right. Yeah.
So it's just one of those things, man, where I'm like, they're not designing out of all the things they could do with their hardware. I'm not seeing anything that is going to be groundbreaking in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to be rinse and repeat. Basically, is going to be the original promises of the 7th generation.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, here's the weird part about it. Okay, if we look at these consoles and the power aspect of it and what you're able to do and what more room and freedom you have as a developer, cool. But I look at something even more simple than that. Let's look at the Wii, the Wii U, and then now the PS5. Those three consoles are giving you controller options to do something different. And almost nobody has taken advantage of either one of those situations, minus the Wii, because you were kind of forced to. Because it was the main controller, but then even then they kind of gravitated towards the classic controller and the pro controller in that aspect. So I look at these developers, and like I said, I don't want to speak out of line because I'm not a developer. I'm nowhere close to it. But seeing games in the past that didn't have this much power, they had more workarounds and they were more in-depth and creative game than we have now. And it's clear as day to see. Because I see people posting all the time, like this post has been going around for Last of Us 2. It's like, oh, Naughty Dog has so much attention to detail. And I'm watching the video, I'm like, what are they talking about? It's like, exactly. She runs up, she hits the guy with the shotgun, he flies out the window. I was like, is that what you excited about? Like, are your standards that low at this point? So, I mean, my game should have been above and beyond right now, but all they are now is just pretty. They're not doing anything different from what they were before. I mean, there's some things here and there that you couldn't do, but in essence, no, we're not doing anything different right now. It's not. Exactly. It's very still, very, very still.
I mean, you'll impress me when you take a calculator CPU and make it a gaming console.
Right.
That's when you'll impress me. And that kind of talent has been gone for so long, and I don't know if that'll ever be a thing again, to be honest with you.
No,
because
I don't think
the way everybody's being, the availability of training, just the talent pool period is just not really there.
I thought the indie scene was going to do it though, but it seemed
I
like
really did.
somebody found a formula and then everybody stuck with it.
Game Maker, I think, is what it is. Game Maker and Unity, probably, that kind of stuck everybody in a gravity well, if you speak, as far as getting stuff done. So
they were close. I was like, oh, indie's about to be the new third party, because the way third parties were maneuvering, I was like, oh, indie's about to be the new third party. And then after a while, everybody doing the same side scroll, 2D, 8-bit, 16-bit. I'm like, all right, come on, somebody do something different. Y'all were so close.
It's because the one and done project is no longer a thing anymore.
Right.
Everything has to be, in case it's successful, iterative. So if let's make this game engine for blah, 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 blah. Well, if it blows up, we need to make sure we build a whole engine for it so we can just dump other assets in it and keep reusing the same. And that's where everything goes now. Whether it's built from scratch or it uses something existing, that appears to be the way things are being done now. And it's kind of frustrating when you think about it. And there are no new takes. Like, it took Nintendo to take Havoc and did what they did with it to do something like Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, Halo had used this engine for how many years?
Right.
And we never really saw that level of interactivity with that engine. So, like, and we're talking about a decades old physics engine. And it's just amazing to me that the amount of things that we're missing out on, because clearly there are people other than Nintendo that are that talented. Yeah. And they're just not, they're not being put in the same scenario where they're like, hey, play in the sandbox. Tell me what you come up with. It's never that way. It's like, we have a project, we have a deadline, code, go.
Right.
So, and I think I think we're kind of lost, unfortunately, because that's not going to happen again, because there's no Segas of the world and there's no Nintendos of the world that are still going around competing with somebody other than Nintendo. I mean, they can't clone themselves, so who else is going to be out there to challenge them with something else new and different?
Right. Because they used to be Sega. I mean, and that's what we were talking about as far as the arcade games. Sega were king of that. But even then, they've kind of shunned away from that too. It's just Sonic now. It's that and the games from Atlas with Persona and Shin Megami. But I mean, I guess I can understand if you're going to be on these newer platforms, you kind of need a bigger turnaround. Yeah. But for me, like we were talking about, just take all your stuff over to Switch. I mean, it's not like you have an obligation to these other two. I mean, yeah, of course you don't want to burn bridges, but at the same time, I mean, keep your tried and true over there, but then try all your new stuff over here on the Switch.
Why not? Yeah. And worst case scenario, if they dump you, you always got Steam.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a wrap. We got there's a whole lot of comments here, but
it's a lot.
I think we kind of covered. We kind of talked over a lot of the points that people were making here, and they were asking for some stuff. Jack Gates calling me Shadowbox again, but I know that was kind of a joke. But, yeah, and some about the mouse and keyboard support. Yeah, that seems to have been a thing since Wii. So I think that's going to continue to go forward as far as mouse and keyboard. But as far as it being Bluetooth, probably not, because that's a walking vulnerability there if you have Bluetooth keyboard.
Wasn't there a keyboard or something that's in Japan for the Switch or something like that?
There's keyboards you can use now. You just have to do it via USB.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't do it via Bluetooth. So right now the only approved Bluetooth devices are Nintendo controllers. So
right.
They have a list of their own IDs, and those are the only Bluetooth IDs that it accepts.
Thought the Switch didn't use Bluetooth though.
Oh yeah. It's funny how that works, huh? Because Bluetooth is only used for voice chat. Apparently, you can only. Yeah, that's Oh man, I just don't understand some of the logic of these people. But yeah, that's the gaming industry for you, man. But yeah, so it's not exactly me disagreeing with everything MVG was saying. It's just like your boy was wrong, man. They was caught dead to rights. He'd been talking about it for the longest time, and he's not the only person. Obviously, a lot of people have been talking about Switch Pro for the longest time, and all of them did the same walk back. Well, Nintendo is always developing a lot of hardware. Like Nintendo told you. They said when they asked specifically for Switch Pro, we're not going to talk about stuff that's actively in development. We're not going to do it, and we're always actively looking for the next hardware.
They always say that.
So they were talking about what you was talking about, but they've been planning it since 2017. So like, what do you expect? Like, and it's not going to be some half gen step that y'all are talking about. They're not going to follow what Sony and Microsoft do, and I think that was one of the points here. I don't know why y'all want them to do that. I don't know why you think that will make them successful, but it's not. The chances that Nintendo takes are what makes them successful.
Exactly. Sometimes, they bite some in the behind, but, they come back and they swing hard and they knock it out the park. Because, I mean, honestly, what spawned from the Wii U? Splatoon spawned from the Wii U.
And that was a success.
That was a success on the Wii U for what you can deem a success. And now look at Splatoon 2. They get ready to do Splatoon 3. Astral Chain just came out for the Switch in the sense of success. With that, like, ARMS could be a success. I just don't know where they're going with it. But they're giving you new IP. And that was also another stupid comment of, like, Nintendo has no new IPs. And, like, what are you talking about? Like,
new IPs.
Constantly got new IPs. And I was like, even with Labo, as much as people make fun of it, if you're into model crafting and all that stuff, putting cars together, putting the Gundam suits and stuff, like me putting Labo together was fun. And then experiencing it and playing with it and doing all the other stuff, Mario Kart Circuit, to where they literally have it to where you can use your Switch as the controller for that and build your own course. Like, no one else is going to do that but Nintendo. So you asking them to go third party is asinine. Like, stop. You're never going to get any type of creativity ever again if they go away.
Yeah, Boston Sam is here talking about game build a garage instead as well. Because that may be a way to foster new talent, but we'll see. We'll have to see. So
Switch VR. Me being like the only person that seems to talk about VR for the most part. Switch VR. Nintendo would have the IP to do it, but they would have to compete right now with the standalone genre. I don't think they could get into that plug into a console situation. Like Sony may be able to get away with it. I'm curious as into what they do with this VR2 that they're doing, but everybody's shifting to Quest, and it's kind of like the older crowd that's been rocking with VR since day one. They're kind of pissed off about it because when you play PC VR, you can see like the great fidelity, the high frame rate, the high refresh rate, all of that. It doesn't make you nauseous or any of that. But standalone is getting to that point, but just the graphical fidelity is going down. So they're kind of like the Switch of VR right now.
Yeah.
And people are not too excited about it. So I don't know how Nintendo themselves would put, let's say they go back to home consoles and then handheld and then VR. That'd be kind of a stretch.
Yeah, I think for them to do it, it would definitely have to be a mind-blowing experience because Nintendo has already tried and failed at that long before. And GameCube originally was supposed to be a VR experiment as well. So they were going to try to do the 3D glasses with it and whatnot and try to do some type of partial VR, AR stuff with that as well. And they have not found something that's like, hey, this is the thing. The closest thing we got to that was 3DS. To where you don't need some funky headset on your head or anything like that, and you get this perception of, hey, here's this dimension shifting device that I can jump into kind of situation. I think once they figure that out and they figure out how to put a 3DS on your head, they'll do it. But as of right now, until they find that magic moment, they're not going to jump in on it. They're probably hard at R&D on that right now as we speak. Anyway, trying to find a way in. But
right, because I mean, if people have to understand, like Nintendo's always been for everyone, and they always think about the aspect of family. So coming from someone that has kids, and I have a headset, taking that thing off and passing it to somebody else is annoying.
Yep.
Because you have to make adjustments. Not everybody's head is the same. So you got to uncrank it, unstrap it, put it on somebody else, crank it up, strap it, let him take his turn, take it off, put it on the next one, and it gets annoying. So I'm pretty sure Nintendo is waiting for either the technology to where once is also going to be cost efficient, but then they're going to also look for an ability to where, like, say, like these glasses, hey, take them off, pass them to somebody else. It's got to be that simple for them because it makes no sense to do it otherwise.
I think that's what it'll probably end up being if they do that. It'll be kind of like partial AR kind of solution and whatnot, and it'll be lightweight to where you can pass it and you just pair it via Bluetooth. It won't be anything like high end where there's 50 million batteries hanging off the back of your head. Like it'll be something lightweight, I think, and it's probably going to take a long time for tech to get that way because Google Glass looked real gross early on, and I don't think the tech has matured. That much.
No, not at all. Without a PC, at least. Like,
not without a PC.
Yeah, it hasn't. I mean, Oculus is doing a good job. Like them having Oculus Link now, and where they have certain apps where you can do the stuff wireless, to where it's like going from your headset to the PC wirelessly, and it works. When it wants to work, but it's at that point to where Oculus is getting greedy. To where now, like, we had to do some backlash because they were trying to put ads in games. So it's like you're playing a game and an ad will pop up. Like, come on, dude, I paid for this already. What are you doing? but I mean, they're trying to milk it because they don't have competition for real. So somebody got to do something. But I mean, Nintendo will, but I got a feeling it's going to be way down the road before they touch it. Yeah,
that's the motivation is going to have to be there for them to want to jump into it. They're going to have to see something that just says kind of like when Karen Kaplan, when she gave her original take, when she said, "Hey, you're flying to Japan this weekend," and then they go to Japan. Like, what are we going to Japan for? You're just going to go see something, and then you go there, and then Japanese dudes walk up to them. Hand them Wii remotes, and they're like, "What are they?" They're going to turn on the screen. Just tell us what you think, and then go from there. And it's just immediate. And unless it ends up being like that, which we all know how that ended up going, I don't think they're going to press go on it. And they are and they do the same things with Nintendo of America going forward now too. So they'll send, members of the Treehouse or whoever, fly them over there and say, "Hey, look, what do you think? You're going to be our ambassadors for, what do you think the expectations are for bringing this to market," kind of situation. And basically they'll judge by their reaction and just say, "Oh, they can't stop playing it. So obviously we're going to bring this to market," kind of situation. Yeah. So we'll see. I think once you get that fun in the can, I do think VR could be just like that. So
Boston Samus says, imagine being able to enter a movie theater and play Mario Kart on the theater screen on the fly. Nintendo needs to think big and practical. You can get something close to that right now. Okay, so just real quick, you can get something close to that right now, but it will require you, of course, to have your Switch. You have to have it on a capture card so that way it can come to your monitor. And then you have virtual desktop from your headset connected to it. And then you can go into big screen. And big screen, you can be in a big theater, you can be in a drive-in or whatever, and then play it that way. Because I play some of my PC games on big theater, like I was playing Dragon Ball Fighter Z.
Just being up close.
And even if you don't want to be up close, they'll let you move back. And then you use your actual controller, not the VR controller, because you can pair it via Bluetooth. So it works that way. It's just you have to do a lot of workarounds.
Yeah. But Dark Boy said anybody know anybody selling Wii U's? I'm trying to replace mine. Man,
I got
good
lucky.
luck, man. Good luck. And I think they went down a lot since the $800 days. So you can probably get a couple of sets for $200 or $300 now. So they've gone down to at least the original MSRP now. So I would hop on your local Amazon or Facebook Marketplace, wherever you want to go. And then you can get them from there. So, but yeah, man, we'll go ahead and call this a wrap. I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night myself anyway. But I'm going to continue doing this, and obviously I'll have choice words for this as well on this weekend. So we'll talk further about it in this whole Switch Pro nonsense, if you will. But so far, so good. From what I see, I like it. I like the fact that the cutout was there, and I explained that on Twitter to one of the Juices Loose podcast members as well about that, why that hole is there. When you open the Switch up, there's a heat pipe that goes up to the fan. The heat pipe goes all the way down to where the SoC actually is. That's the actual source of the heat. So right at that spot where the source of the heat is before it goes out from the heat pipe, that's where Nintendo put those grates in on the new dock. So, and what that's going to do is a bunch of complaints about the Nintendo Switch dock early on during launch was the Switch would swell up in them or whatnot. And that's really from the user, because the Switch is kind of slow going from undocked to docked. So you'll be playing, and then you go on docked or whatever, and the thing starts kicking in like it's in battery mode still, and it's just literally burning the SoC and swelling the plastic up inside of the dock, and it'll warp.
Have you noticed that though? Have you noticed that? Like a lot of our early complaints, you don't hear them anymore?
Early complaints about it warping, yes.
Like warping, screen scratching, the kickstand, like all the stuff that I'm assuming they fixed in this one. Like people just forgot about it. So they just stopped looking. The only thing they focus on now is the Joy-Cons. And most people Joy-Cons don't drift. They just hear about it and then they just make a deal out of it.
Yeah, like I have it bad, but it's in random spots, so I can make a good pair of Joy-Con, because either my left one would drift or my right one would drift, so I could take one left one and one right one that's good and put them together. But usually if I need to fix one, it's literally what you expect. You lift a little plastic on the side, blow a little can there and there, and keep it moving. Or if I actually need to open it up and look at the pad to see if it's scraped all the way away, I can look. And I have one that actually is scraped all the way away, but it's literally one out of, like, I think I have 6 pair. So one out of 6 pair actually has the pad scraped all the way away. So
wow. Dang.
Yeah. And it's completely unrepairable at this point. So we just use that one for, like, I guess the Ring Fit now. So at this point,
I stopped collecting them things a long time ago. I was heavy, every color. I was at the store quick. I stopped doing that.
Yeah, because it's eventually going to wear. It's a flaw in the design. So there's nothing you can do about it. And us as Americans, we love to press down on stuff while we're turning instead of just turning them. Nothing you can really do about that. So
right.
But yeah. That's it, man. We'll call it a night. I appreciate you coming on, man.
No problem, man.
Yeah, let everybody know about your channel. This is ShadowCast. We're kind of informal here, but fuck it.
The Gaming Grounds gaming channel, and I've been posting a lot lately, more than I usually do. I even had somebody that subscribed today and was like, "Oh, I didn't even know you had a gaming channel." I'm like, "You probably wouldn't, because I don't really post like that, but because I don't post on everything. So if it's interesting to me, then I'll talk about it. But I'm getting more back into the swing of doing the channel. So Gaming Grounds podcast used to be a thing, but now I'm on the Winging It podcast every Sunday at 7 Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, if you want to check out my videos, like I said, it's the Gaming Grounds channel. So I mean, definitely come by, check it out, subscribe if you like it. Yeah, I mean, I'll be putting a lot more content up there, especially centered around this whole OLED Switch situation. But I try to put some VR content up there every now and again, but it's getting a little more difficult to do. Because the Oculus, it updates damn near weekly, and there's always something they're messing with or changing, and some days it'll work, some days it doesn't. So yeah, I mean, I kind of tamper with that a little bit, but yeah, come check me out.
VR world.
Man.
Yeah, man, I had to tell people about your channel, because I'm like, man,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I try to tell, like, man, he got a channel. He's like, oh, I didn't even know you had a channel. Like, bro,
he was like, yeah, we have a channel. I was like, yeah.
It's like, we all got channels on the podcast. Like, and I put out links for the podcast too. And people are like, man, you was on the podcast? Yes, I was on the podcast on Sunday. He was like, man, I look at your channel be there. I was like, but I be on the podcast and I tell y'all to go and y'all don't go. So I don't, it is what it is, man.
I think we got a lot of traffic this time around with this whole Switch situation. So I mean, a lot more people should be paying attention. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I know I got a lot more attention, considering the fact that I was literally in everybody posts just going off. So I mean, it helped. So hopefully a lot more people come through to your ShadowCast when you do them, or, you know, Andre's channel, or even the podcast itself, and Jay doing the gaming channel over there as well. So yeah, man, we all got differing content, you know, so it's not like there's 4 or 5 guys constantly repeating each other. Even Sandstorm, he has his different content too. So I mean, hopefully he becomes like an honorary Winging It podcast member. But, you know, at this point, yeah, I mean, he's pretty much a part of the channel. So I mean, check all of us out.
Yep, follow everybody. You know, that's how we do. So, you know.
Oh, and Vicky too. I didn't want to get beat up. My bad. I forgot about Vicky.
Yeah, you got to throw on there.
My bad.
She's definitely part of it. So you got to add Vicky on there.
Yeah,
Miss Professor White. You got to add her on there. So was that what you need to say in the chat?
So was that her music? Because like she liked the comment that I put up, but she didn't say anything.
So I don't know if that's her music or not. I don't know, but it's nice though. I was listening to. I was grooving for a minute, man. This is good.
Because I mean, I know channels that do that to where they have like 10 hours of music on, but they have their own thing. So when I saw it had Fangirl up there, I was like, "Is this hers?" I said, "We might need to talk," because between you, Rob from Rules to Review, I was like, a lot of people do music but don't say nothing about it.
Yeah.
Sandstorm, I was like, okay, you make beats too. Okay, it's nice to know.
yeah. There's another guy, Abaddon, who's on the old on the Play Essence podcast. He's dropping beats like, you know.
Yeah, because I saw him on ShadowCast, and he was mentioning that.
Yeah, he be dropping them. Speaking of Spawncast, I'll never be on that thing again. But
that's never happened. You'll be mentioned, but you never be on there.
Yeah, man. I'll probably definitely be mentioned tomorrow. But, you know, it is what it is. Y'all can kind of watch that if y'all want to. I mean, it's up to you. I don't really care. I don't have a problem with John at all. So it's right. It is what it is. But he's got to cater to whatever he's got to cater to, and I understand that. So, but y'all have a good night. Do y'all play games, have fun, to impress other people, all that good shit? You know what all my jokes are. Y'all have a good night, and we'll call it a good one.
Peace.
Deuces.